Welcome to the Old Dad Jazz Podcast. I'm your host, Matthias, or Matt, whatever you want to call me. And I'm here with Nisha Manek, and she's a MD. She's a rheumatologist, and she was, I believe, assisting Tiller, or at least meeting Tiller on Thursdays for a long while. And even though she's not a quote unquote scientist, he entrusts her with a lot of his insights, and she came up with a book that we're going to talk about today. So welcome, Nisha Manek.
Hey, Matt, it's great to be with you today. Thanks for inviting me. This is very exciting.
So bridging science and spirit. I read the book, and wow, there's a lot in the book to unpack. So first of all, I really love that in the beginning of the book, he says to meditate. He's like, if you want to work on this, you got to meditate.
So, I'm a medical doctor by profession, and I've been a very academic sort of physician. What that means is I went to med school in Scotland, in the UK, did training in London. I'm a fellow of the Royal College of Physicians. So, these are benchmarks in excellence in medical sciences. So I'm very much of that analytical, finding out what's wrong with the human body, the human illnesses. And so here I'm at the Mayo Clinic, which is really a very astoundingly good place for conventional care. And there we do prescriptions. We analyze the body's chemistry and we prescribe medications. This is the paradigm for modern medicine. And I knew, though, that there is a very limited way of thinking. Okay, this is A causes B causes C, and you try to, fix things. And, I think it gets us a long way, but we quickly run into limitations. So I was really looking at this whole notion of the energetic systems in the body, which we cannot see in medicine. So if I were in anatomy class and I do my dissection, I don't see these things. So I'm looking at research around the energy systems, and whose work do I run into is Bill Tiller, okay, William Tiller. And he coined the term subtle energies. And he wrote many papers in medical journals, so I could get access to this work. And wouldn't you know, I'm reading them. I couldn't understand his work. It's really, really tough when you have equations and terminology that in medicine I'm not familiar with it. Okay, so I contacted him many times, and I was very, very persistent, and finally he agreed to meet with me in Arizona. I was attending a medical conference. I was giving a talk. And so it was during that dinner, and I really went into his book, Psychoenergetic Science, and I had all these questions. But what came out of that really beautiful dinner meeting was the fact that Tiller is a physicist of the highest caliber. But he's also, this outer knowledge is almost balanced or informed by the inner work. The inner work is so obviously evident in how he approaches the interactions. Okay, it wasn't
People
this
don't realize
high and
that.
mighty. No, yeah, it wasn't this, hey, and he didn't answer me for a long time. I discovered later on, I thought I had this story in my head that he's not writing to me. Why would he? I'm just a physician. I'm not a physicist. I'm trying to enter into a universe. He's not going to let me in. Okay, there are these academic mindsets, but that was the furthest thing from his mind. The simple truth was this: Tiller does not own a computer. He doesn't check emails.
Oh,
Okay, so what he does is a very old professor style. He writes things. He responds in a very written, old professorial style. And so the email that I would send to him would go to his associate, Walter Dibble. And Dibble would not know what to make of these emails from this doctor, but he would tell Bill, hey, there is somebody, and she seems very interested in your work, but there's no specific question. I just said, I want to meet you. That wasn't making much headway. So finally, I did say, I want to have dinner with you. And that's when Dibble says, okay, So I met him. So this person, Tiller, is very balanced in his outer and inner work. And initially, when I left the dinner meeting, he said no. When I asked him, would you mentor me? I think this is really amazing. I don't understand it. And I think we need to translate it. And for me, it was really for my understanding. That's what I came to Tiller with, was my own unpacking of his ideas. Something told me it was the truth. How did I know I didn't know? I mean, that's the real conundrum. Something inside of me responded. So when he actually had a change of heart, that Nisha, okay, I've had a second thought. I think we could work together, but your role is not to do experiments. You don't need to replicate Tiller's work, or my work. But what you need to do is, if you can communicate to medicine, your colleagues. I even remember he says, if you can communicate to your colleagues something about my work, then I think you can move medicine forward in a new way.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't even use the word information medicine or the words information medicine. And so that phone call, he told me, before I accept you as a mentee, you need to meditate. That's what you're referring to.
Right, right.
So the first condition was no money. I have no money, no funding. You're on your own on this. Okay. And the second thing was, you need to meditate. Now, he didn't give me any directions. He didn't say you do it this way or this much in terms of time. No, that was up to me. But he was very, very clear. You need to meditate before I can work with you.
Mm.
And that
So,
was tremendous. Yeah.
but it's important, so that you said himself, he started meditating, I think, uh, in the 70s or 60s, and he's had a
Yes.
long continuous practice of meditating practice, and I think that's serving him well, because he's seeing beyond the normal Newtonian, or whatever the paradigm of science right now is, that the materialistic only exists, and beyond what you can measure, that let's not go there, because if like Sheldrake's work, I often on this podcast I mentioned a couple of times Sheldrake, and they don't let him his experiments with telepathy and science of getting stared at, and even the phone calls, like name 4 people that you're the closest with, and by chance it'll be 25%, but he gets 45%, and
Yes.
science kind of dismisses that as, weird.
Well, science has this classical physics. Newton's physics is classical. Even Einstein was classical, okay? Because you can see things, you can see light, you can see big Jupiter and its moons and how it orbits. You can measure those things. They're very classical physics, and then you can go all the way down from the biggest bodies in nature down to the quantum level, which is particle physics. And somehow those classical notions actually break down in quantum mechanics. And we have those wave particle dualities, one very well known, piece of the puzzle in quantum mechanics. How Tiller goes with all of this is quite unique in the sense that he is dealing with invisible things. Okay, consciousness is invisible. Sheldrake is dealing with invisible, capabilities of humans, which are psychoenergetic, okay? But they're very real. Matthias, when as I was researching the physics around bridging science and spirit, people think, who are my favorite physicists? And I'll tell you, there were 3 names that now come up for me as a physician, as somebody who's now gone into the science a little bit, if you want me to share with you,
Yes.
because it comes into this whole notion, why does science take so long to accept certain truths. And the first one was actually Maxwell, James Clerk Maxwell. He's a Scottish physicist in the 1800s, and he unified electricity and magnetism. He made it electromagnetism. It is a huge, huge jump in humankind's evolution, Maxwell's equations, okay? Because in the 1800s, people thought electricity and magnets are separate phenomena in nature. Maxwell is saying, no, they're equivalent. It's the same thing. So a
Right.
magnet, you move it, you get electricity. Electricity creates magnets. We use this all the time now, right? So at that time, Maxwell, he has this immense insight into the unification of magnetism and electricity. But here's the real juice about Maxwell. And even Einstein has written around this. Maxwell said that although you see a magnet, pretend this is a magnet, it's a mouse, it
Yeah.
has invisible fields around it. The word field. You have an object and you have an invisible circle of influence extending away from the body, which is the field. I have a field around me. We call it the biofield. Maxwell introduced this concept of fields, invisible, but we know they're there. So Maxwell was a genius. I mean, he put that as part of nature. It's not only things we can see and measure, this mouse and this computer and Matthias with his headphones, but there are fields around, okay? And he was saying it with electromagnetic or EMF fields, right? So we now know that. At that time, this was really a very radical notion, the word fields. The second physicist, in my view, that is, again, dealing with invisible world or invisible nature is Ludwig Boltzmann. Ludwig Boltzmann championed the idea of atoms, atomism. Now, when he was doing his physics in Graf, Vienna, Austria, okay? I think it was the University of Graf. But anyway, the point here is this. Boltzmann said, anytime you have a steam engine, that was the time of the Industrial Revolution, and he said that there are these molecules, atoms, which are bouncing around, which are causing pressure. It is this that we're measuring in temperature and pressure and volume, those macroscopic qualities. It is this little microscopic things which are the average thing that we're measuring. But nobody had seen atoms. No one had seen these things. And they thought he was crazy. Why in God's name would you want to have atoms? I mean, he was actually, accused, you might say, of being foolish.
Wait,
He
what did
committed
they believe
suicide.
before? What did they believe before atoms?
There was no such atomic theory at all. They just
Oh,
had
okay.
the equations. The equations predict how a steam engine moves. We can understand it. The physics is closed. There's no need for anything further. Boltzmann said, no, there is more to this whole story than just this pressure and volume and temperature measurements, which you can do. It's the average behavior of huge numbers of molecules or atoms. Really, it was atomic. So within a few years is a book published by Perry. He was a French physicist who said, yeah, atomic theory is correct. Even the Brownian motion that you see in a microscope, those little things that are wiggling around, those are particles which are wiggling around because they're hitting each other. So this was, even Einstein had looked at that and calculated the Avogadro's number, which is how many molecules there are in a certain volume of stuff. Okay, it's a standard of physics or chemistry. Okay, so Avogadro's number came from those observations of things just wiggling about, a Brownian motion. So we have Boltzmann He knows there's something more to this whole thermodynamics than what you can see with your naked eyes or macroscopic behaviors. You have Maxwell talking about field effects, and then you have the genius of Paul Dirac, who says, okay, let's look at equations of little things and equations of massive things. But the electron, you can have approximation with those classical equations. They come close, but he says that's not good enough. Let's try and unite these. And then came the Dirac equations. But from the Dirac equations, he predicted antimatter. He predicted there has to be electron, but also an opposite particle, the positron. Okay, and that's the first time that equations had predicted something that was discovered later.
Wow. So
Okay, that was 4 years later.
it's almost like in a spiritual sense, whenever there's something really good, there'll be something really bad trying to, I don't know. You know what I
Well,
mean?
well, you're leaping a little ahead there, but Matt, I guess, spirituality tells us things and science confirms it.
Mm,
Science does come later, but spirituality is also scientific in its methods. Okay, and I've often said that, in science, we go to a lab with certain conditions, we describe those conditions, and then we put a protocol.
right.
Those protocols are precise and the outcomes are precise, then we interpret them. But just think about it, in spirituality, it's the same thing. We prescribe a mantra, do the mantra, set the conditions right. And then, in Tibetan spirituality, the teacher, the guru will ask, have you had this happen to you? What's the outcome? So
Mm-hmm.
it seems like to me, spirituality has its protocol, science has its protocol,
Right.
spirituality has its
Th-
outcomes,
That's
science has
very
its
interesting.
outcomes.
Like if you do certain things, then if you experiment, you can call it even an experiment. You can say if you meditate for a certain amount of time, for a month, for 3 months, and track your progress, you can be very meticulous and be like, yeah, I'm feeling better. You can be like that.
Exactly. So this is a citizen scientist. Don't take everything that we are saying
Yeah.
at face value. You must find out for yourself.
Right.
Always.
I want to go back to the Dirac equation. So what implication does that there's an opposite always, what implication does have on Tiller's work? Because Tiller's
Mhm.
work is soul energy. So how does that relate to the soul energy?
So Dirac stumbled into the biggest secrets of nature, which is, and even the word secret is a little bit, I'm overusing it perhaps, but nature has symmetries, okay? And to describe nature's behavior in many realms, you need symmetries in terms of equations, in terms of exchange of particles. Say in the neutron and protons, when they exchange particles, you need symmetry in laws of nature and equations to describe them, and then to describe them accurately, and there's been confirmed by observation, okay, in the particle colliders. Now, Tiller, what was very interesting was that this symmetries were then applied in materials way to crystals. Crystals are highly symmetrical objects,
Right.
okay? You have the atoms arranged in a very precise, symmetrical way in a lattice-like arrangement, which gives you properties of matter which are quite extraordinary. Diamond is one of them, okay, carbon. And so Tiller was actually one of the world's experts in crystals. He's the world's expert in crystallography and a material scientist. So he already knew the laws of physics that describe symmetry in great detail. It's
Mm-hmm.
called group theory, okay? And we won't go into that, but group theory is just various ways you use symmetry to create new things, new
Right.
patterns.
So basically, the nature has always a need for symmetry. There will always be whatever shape there is. There will always try to be a symmetry, and then as it changes, that will just try to be symmetric as well. Is that
Well,
correct?
yes, but it's also inherent in nature, and also the fact that man can use that symmetry for
Mm.
advantage. Okay, so we can create new materials and silicon and transmitter chips and all of that. That's symmetry. Okay.
Okay.
And so what was very interesting is that particle physics used gauge theory to describe um, space itself. You have to have you have gauge 1, which is electromagnetic, then you have SU2 gauge, 3 gauge, 4, and so on, and
Okay.
infinite.
Okay.
Okay.
You're losing me a bit there.
Yeah. Okay. So
So,
it's just the gauges are simply the rules and the number of variables needed to describe something. Okay.
okay.
So in U1 gauge electromagnetism, so a particle has a direction and in a certain plane, and you just need 2 variables to describe it. In
Right.
SU2, you need 3 and 4 and so on. Okay. SU3, you need more. And then as you go higher and higher in gauge symmetries, it's even finer information. You need more variables to accurately understand and describe something. Okay,
Right.
that's all. Just don't get too lost in it. It's simply a descriptor of nature.
So, but basically, it's a thing you can measure. There are some instruments that you can measure these things that you're talking about.
At least in the U1, which is electromagnetism or the standard model, that's the that's leptons, quarks, electrons, all of the Higgs boson was the most recent one, okay, in 2012. So that's the standard model. Everything's filled there. All the house, as I call it, is complete. Um, and then when you go beyond electromagnetism, then you're going to SU2. Beyond that is SU3. Okay, so you can actually describe with equations these 3 levels. Beyond that is very high. These are higher and higher. And I'm not a physicist, but I think we're going to evolve our science and our instruments to get there.
Right.
We
Right.
will get there. Yeah.
So right now it's able to only measure electromagnetism, and then the others you figure out by.
Accurately, yes.
Okay. Got it.
Electromagnetism is where our world is. If I look around, it's the light is shining. I'm talking to you through the computer Zoom link. That's electromagnetism all
Right.
the
Right.
way.
Right.
And information is being transmitted, but it's through EMF waves. Okay, and then it's
Okay.
decoded. Yeah.
So how did I'm interested in the pH change of water because that's very interesting. So it basically started with a intention in device that was that you imprint an intention on. So that's
Okay.
for standard science. That's already kind of like, oh, what are you doing? But the thing is, I was once trying to explain it to somebody, but he wanted more data, so I failed miserably. So this is part of the reason why we're here, because this is actually simple stuff, but it's also complicated. But if you can
Yes.
explain it
Yeah,
properly, I
so
think
here
you can.
actually I have a bottle of water, and just a moment, I'm going to
All right,
take a quick drink here.
there we
So
go.
here, we've got a bottle of water
That's
here.
it. Water is very important.
It is very important. So Tiller approached the whole question from the perspective of classical physics that when you hold an intention, you can't change any material out there in a measurable way. That's our assumption.
Right.
It's an assumption. We all know that. That's what we call objective science. That I'm here and this water is over there and I'm physically separate from it. I can sit here and intend forever about let me increase the temperature of this water, let me freeze this water, let me do something to this water in a measurable way.
Right.
Okay, so
So
but that assumption holds true more or less.
right.
So but Tiller says, okay, let's test this out. Let's test this because the assumption seems to hold, but I think we have to test it out formally, but not using brain science. He didn't he you see, consciousness in the Tiller's world, and I agree with him, is not locked in your skull. It's not your brain doing something. Okay, your brain is a perfect receiver, beautiful receiver. It has many neural links. We're talking to each other because I can do that with my brain, but it's not the source of my consciousness. Okay,
Yeah, that's
it's an
already very
interface.
controversial for science.
Yes, it is, and we won't go there.
Well,
But you
we
asked
can go
about the
there,
water.
but we can go there. But I'm interested in. So basically, if I'm understanding correctly, Stiller found a way that there is a, even though I might not be able to change the water I have to ice or steam, but my intention, there is that small particle, that small change that you can actually do something with the water that's out of the ordinary realm, right?
Yes, you can. So it takes a great deal of discipline, first of all. That's one of the conditions, that you're having to hold an intention absolutely without doubt. No doubt. And so Tiller said, okay, he drew up a protocol. This was unprecedented because no such protocol exists. He
Right.
had to create a protocol, and he says, you have to say, what is the change in water that we can measure on a continual basis? Because would this even work? It sounds crazy, right? He chose pH because you can do that continuously. You could
Mm-hmm.
do a lot of things continuously, but that's what he chose. And there are meters, pH meters of 0.001 pH units. You can't do this with
Wait, hold
litmus
on.
paper.
So
Yeah,
if he wanted to, he could he say, change to intend to change the temperature?
he could have. Yeah.
Oh, wow. That,
Actually, let me give you, actually, I'm
okay.
going to sidetrack a little bit here. When I was meeting him and Jean Tiller for dinner one time, and it was summer in Arizona. It's very hot there. It's 120 outside. So, you can fry in the desert. It's
Yeah.
dry, bone dry, 120. And I'm in with the Tillers having dinner. You know what Dr. Tiller said to me? He says, Nisha, Jean and I imprinted one of the devices that we plugged into our home to make the interior temperature exactly 72 degrees.
Come on.
Oh, and then I said, oh, tell me more. He says, so our temperature is 72 degrees. We don't use much air conditioning. It just, we regulate it with our intention.
What?
Exactly.
This reminds me. I'm not gonna say her name, but I remember once there was this woman I met, and she told me that she intended on staying that weight, and that there was unwavering intention, and that she just stays at that weight. It never changes.
Yeah. So you see, our consciousness has enormous power,
Right.
but we are not coherent enough.
Coherent meaning that you doubt
It's
and
not
you
one
like,
pointed. It's
yeah,
just, okay,
yeah,
it's like a light bulb. In the end of the book, I even say a light bulb is scattered photons. It lights a little bit, it's doing its job. But a self-illumined man, a Buddha-like consciousness, which is Tiller is an adept. He's masterful at this. So when he makes up his mind or holds an intention, he can do it. Okay?
right. But that would signify as well that he's already pretty spiritually advanced. So he's the benefit of that is he's a really Stanford scientist, but he's also spiritually evolved to the sufficient
Yes.
degree. So he has both at the same time. So his intentions and the other meditators, because I believe you
Yeah.
said that he takes on people that have been long time meditators, so they're very good at intending,
Yeah. Yeah.
right?
So Matthias, you bring a very important point. Tiller gave meaning. He gave a lot of meaning to this experiment. He is a scientist of the most excellent kind. I mean, this is a stupendous mind, okay? But he also did this protocol and he gave meaning to it. It was not some foolish thing on the side here. He took time, created a protocol, and yes, when you are going to change a material like water,
Mm,
how do we know? There's no precedent in the scientific literature whether the intention will do this, change pH. Will it take a day? Will it take weeks? Will it take months? Will it ever happen? We
right.
don't know. Okay.
Okay, I have
So
this question because it occurred to my mind. So I don't know anything about physics or any, like my knowledge is poor, but if so the audience knows, because maybe my audience maybe some of them don't know either. If you leave water just like that for weeks on end, the how much does pH change in water?
it doesn't. It
It
won't.
doesn't.
It will equilibrate with carbon dioxide in the air, which will dissolve in it, but you have to seal it then. Okay, you're not sort of keeping it open, it'll just evaporate and you have no water. So they're
Right. Okay.
sealed, okay,
Okay.
and there's a pH meter and they're monitoring it. Okay, so it is under very um, lab conditions. It's, if you went to the labs, you'll see, oh yeah, it's a low pH and a meter stuck in there, or pH is recording, there's a data collected by the computer. The
Okay.
ambient conditions of the room were also being monitored, because you see in thermodynamics, whenever you do something to a material, then you have to also do the ambient conditions. You know, it's contained, its temperature, air pressure, all of these are going to affect the water.
Right.
That's all Taylor was doing, standard thermodynamic work. There's nothing heroic here. So I'll tell you, he was also blown away. He used these words. We were blown away that our intention could do anything to water.
Wow.
But it did do something. But here's the key. He says, look, Nisha, you can't, I pressed him on this a lot. I said, why put a device? What's the whole use of this thing? Okay. I don't understand this. It seems so weird. I mean, let's face it, right? Matches, why put this device? I forgot to bring my device. I always have my tiller device mostly with me. Yeah, it's at home. Anyway, so what he realized is that, and this is well-known research, human intention can affect machines from a distance without touching it. Our intention can make something happen.
Like what?
Okay.
Give me an example.
Okay, so random number generators, which is from the Pear Research Lab, if you um, intend to change a series of numbers, you can do it statistically speaking. The signal is there. It will change. The human can have an impact on the machine in a specific direction.
Oh,
The effects are small. They've done billions of this experiments, okay?
so it would technically be possible if you're really good at intention, if you go to the casino and try to program the machine.
Actually, it has happened, and I did that experiment.
You did
Can
that.
I describe it?
Okay.
Yes, I
Yes.
did. I did. It's called, and I went with, it's called Monroe Institute,
Yeah,
and they
I've heard
have
of it.
the Inner Vegas Adventures. So I went. I went, actually. So here's what they do. I'll just tell you.
Hmm.
Because we have the capacity for entrainment, once you're in a meditative way, you can go into your heart and stay there. This is not a selfish thing. You are of an elevated consciousness. Then you go around the craps table. Craps is where you throw two die and you want a certain number. 7 gets you out, which is statistically the most frequent. Okay. I don't know
Right.
the number combinations, but anyway, the craps is 7 and you're out. So I have never played craps in my life. Okay. So I'm throwing the die. And I was in this entrained state, okay? There's a group of us who took this workshop. We all meditate together for an hour or two, and then we go down to the craps floor, the casino floor.
Right.
And by the way, we were banned from the strip. Only a few casinos would allow us there. Yeah. This is
They
a
they
workshop by Joseph Gallenberger.
they
He
saw
has
that
a
you
book.
were cheating. They saw you were manipulating
It's not
matter.
cheating. It's simply that, we are,
No, but
what
they
was
thought you were
interesting is,
cheating. They thought you were
well,
cheating.
what was interesting is that, yes, we didn't lose. I didn't lose a single penny.
What?
I made
Okay.
50. No, I didn't lose. Okay. Statistically, for a complete beginner, somebody like me is going to lose money and come up negative from one weekend in Vegas. Absolutely true. It's going to be maybe a slot machine if you make a little money. Okay. But by and
Right, right,
large,
right.
you're going to
So,
lose money.
so what happened? So you went there and you
Yeah.
intended to throw a certain number and you got
I
it.
didn't even intend. Okay, I was in a very meditative state, and all of us were. And it's interesting that, when you look at each face, it was like looking at your own self. It's like Christ, okay? And I, it's hard to describe. It's like saying, even if somebody, those women who bring you drinks around, do you want a drink, a glass of water?
Right,
They come around with their trays. We knew that even if when they say hello, if they touch you by accident, that they can be healed. You're in such a high state of consciousness, okay?
wow. How long
So
were you meditating for?
what was very interesting was this, that other people, the casino itself benefited because there was such a heightened sense of well-being, of well-wishers around that table.
Mm,
My first throw at the die was 22 minutes, but I don't know. I can remember it, but it was irrelevant. I was just throwing the die. There was a string of numbers, and I could tell, and it's very interesting. You don't even have to say these things. It's almost like communicated, and people would put their numbers, and all of my cohort, shall I call them my friends in that little workshop, yeah, they all won. I didn't put any chips down. I was not in that let I was not in the causative mind. Put 5 chips here, it just didn't occur to me. I was just throwing the die.
right,
And in
right.
fact, they even said I was so good at, there was another one who did for 45 minutes. He was somebody from Disney Studios. He was really good. He could just get into the zone. And the word the zone is not quite right. Okay, you're in a meditative state, expanded consciousness. You give meaning to these things, they will happen. It's not magic. It's just that you have influence over things. And in this case, it was the die. And in my clinical work, I have seen this also in small ways. I call it small ways. No,
Right, right.
there's no way in spirit's world, there's no definitions like this.
So
Okay.
after, go back to the crabs table. So after 22 minutes, they come up to you and they're like, "Yo, you gotta stop," or
No, what happened was I lost the state, and I could
ah,
feel myself coming down, and I actually couldn't even speak. I just said, "It's gone. I can't." And in fact, I just had to sit and just refresh, because it was just such a beautiful state. It was like being around the Buddha's relics.
right.
It's
So
really nice.
how long were you meditating? Was it like a retreat or was it like hours or?
No, just a couple of hours, and we
Okay,
meditate together. um, and then we go down to the craps table, literally. And
that's
I'm making it
amazing.
simplified, but it's called Inner Vegas Adventure if you want to look at it. But you can absolutely do these things, yeah. um,
But in this case, it sounds like it was happening spontaneously without you even intending it. It was just like you were in that state
yeah,
and you were
yeah.
just throwing it and you were winning money. So,
I didn't put any chips down,
oh,
right? It was the other people
that's your first
who
mistake.
made. No,
Okay.
well, it's interesting much is that when you are in this heightened sense of consciousness of oneness, it didn't bother me. I was not separate, Nisha. I was with everyone. I told you Christ, every
Yeah, yeah,
face was like Christ consciousness. I mean, really, it's really quite a marvelous thing to experience.
right. There's no
So
need for
even
money.
even the even the Vegas floor can become a sacred place
Right,
to
right, right.
experience and grow in
So
evolution.
yeah, so there would be no need for money because you are in that state and everything seems complete and joyful. So you are
I was not worried about any income or making money or getting anything. I wasn't about getting. I wanted to give.
right, right, right. Okay. So okay, this was a good sidetrack. So pH change. So you said water under lab conditions. If you just leave it and it doesn't like lab conditions, meaning that it doesn't evaporate, and you just leave it there for weeks on end, the pH won't change at all.
It'll be around. It'll squiggle a bit, but it's around 5.7, 5.8 on ambient conditions. That means room temperature. The pressure doesn't change, so it's around 5.8 mostly. Okay, then you
What do
leave
you
it
mean?
alone.
What do you mean? 5.8% of pH or what?
5.8 pH, sorry. Yeah, pH 5.8. So it's a little acidic. And
Okay.
then over time, you could see in tillers, the graph would just dip very quickly within an hour or two, it would just go down, and then it would start to climb up if it was pH increase. And if it was
Wow.
pH decrease, you just go down, down, down. Okay, so you could see that the trajectory was away from equilibrium.
Yeah.
from calculations, all right? Any pH deviation from equilibrium is meaningful.
Right.
Is
And
meaningful. Do you understand? Because he's measuring 0.001. This is not random. These are very fine measurements.
right.
So he was getting initially zero 0.5, zero 0.6, zero 0.8 pH differences, but he was reaching a full pH. That's a huge signal.
Right. And this has never been done measured in science because the assumption was always there that it's not possible, so they were never tested it.
Well, this has never been done. You're right. Not in the way his target was done. Okay. So this was the magic. Okay. So if Nisha wants to change this pH of water, I would put acid in it. I'd squeeze an orange in it. I would do something to it. Okay. In thermodynamics, if you don't use chemistry, you can jolt the water. You electrify it, then hey, you separate the hydrogen, the electron from the hydrogen atom, you get hydrogen ions, right? So you can do these things with an input of electricity or energy. So we're saying if it's not chemical energy, if it's not electromagnetic energy, where did the energy come from? Right?
Right, right.
That's what Tiller was saying. Okay, where is it coming from? And that was his genius, okay? That once you know thermodynamics, then you know that your intention is informational. Information reduces entropy. When you have entropy reduction, that feeds into free energy. And that's the other thing he found. That free
Hold on.
energy is coming from the space,
Right.
which was
Let's unpack entropy. Explain that term.
so entropy is this haphazard movement, it's disorder. It
Mm-hmm.
was described by Boltzmann, all right? So entropy is the natural order of the universe. That's the second law. Everything is going naturally to disorder. If I sit here all day,
Right.
Matya, and not do anything, over time I'll become diseased or old and gray and die, right? I'm just joking. But basically we're all going down to disorder. All systems left to themselves go to disorder.
Oh, wow. That's wow. This is really strange. I've never contemplated that. If you leave things, I guess if you
To
leave things by
themselves, they'll go to
themselves,
disorder, right? If I say this shelf here behind me, if I toppled it over and put all these statues on the floor, Maja, that's disorder, right?
yeah,
Now, with your energy and my energy, I can put those things back on the shelf one by
sure.
one, use my energy, okay? But it's not going to get back up there on its own. I have to use energy to create order again. But here's the other thing. I need information to know which goes where. Energy by itself is not complete.
Yeah,
People say energy is everything. Yes, not really. I think information and energy are connected very much so. You have to have both.
right.
And information is more fundamental and organizes the energy. But the second law of thermodynamics really says, I mean, at its most fundamental, that every system is going to disorder. Okay? Disorder is the natural state of the universe.
Wow, that's pretty profound statement in a way. Everything is,
Really? Okay.
I don't know,
Well, it is profound. You're right. I
it
guess
seems
it
in a
is
bit,
profound.
it seems in a bit like realistic in a way. It reminds me of that Churchill quote that if you leave things without adjusting them, they're gonna at one point explode with a shattering detonation, and then even more disorder will come because you've not fixed that one thing in your life, and then you put it off and put it off, and then it's gonna one day just kind of explode on you in your face. And that's been true in my life, and probably
So just imagine your mind,
right.
which is the source of this reality, and to bring some order to it. And how do you do that? By observation. You
Mm,
have to just observe yourself. That's what meditation is, not trying to keep your mind silent and get in the gap and all of these things that people try to do. Just sit and observe yourself. Become familiar with your own prejudices, preferences, your own positions, all of it. And if you have certain needs and wants and all that, which we all do, become familiar with them. By shining your awareness on it, even that will shift you.
Right.
Okay, when it will shift you.
But that intention, that takes effort. So in a way, you are moving away from disorder towards order, because you're putting attention on your mind, and therefore I can't speak. So you are
Yeah.
making order in your mind in a way that you haven't before. Because if you just left it, most people, there's anyway. Sorry, bringing up
Well,
quote.
there is laziness, right? We all want
Yes.
things easy,
Yeah.
quick
Yeah. Yeah.
fix, give it to me now. Or, the pandemic, you can see people who will survive this and people who are going to get destroyed by this. Why? Because you can watch Netflix all day. You
Right.
can do useless things all day. Or you can say, I'm going to use this time to understand my own self because I'm by myself.
Right.
I'm
It
here
reminds
inside.
it reminds me of a Thomas Sowell quote that some people age like fine wine and others just turn into vinegar, which is like
Oh boy.
it's true.
Okay, I like that. I don't drink wine, but I sure like vinegar in my salad dressings, okay?
So to change the pH of water, he found a way without putting anything in the water at all. What he developed is a thing called intention device, right?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
what
it
is that?
stores so it's really a simple circuitry box, okay? And it measures about 6 inches by an inch width, this tall. It's really simple and it less than a millionth watt output. And it's not even touching the water, so it's something, the setup is like this, the device is like that, about 6 inches from the water vessel. This is the device that's activated. It's metastable. It's holding the subtle energy information that was created by Tiller.
Okay, can I
Okay.
ask a question about this? Because I was confused. If something has an intention imprinted on it, why does it need a little bit of electricity to work?
you know it doesn't, and that's why I said they lost their controls.
Oh,
It was switched off. You had two devices. I don't have another mouse, but they did lose the information from the activated device, leaked away, and actually the unimprinted device was also activated. Okay, so these things
oh,
you cannot have controls in this sort of subtle energy because nothing blocks it. Remember, it's not electromagnetic. Okay, Tiller said it's magnetoelectric, and he's going into physics. He's creating new terms, and he used that to because um, just like a magnet, when you move it, it creates an electrical current. He says this fundamental property is like a magnet first. It's
right.
not electricity.
So
So
if
he was trying to describe it.
so if I have a device, let's say I have an intention device that's this,
Yes.
and it's imprinted with let's say a very beautiful intention. Would this then, if it's left in a room, would this then start to imprint the whole room with that intention?
Well, it depends if you are successful in imprinting this, but I'll
Oh
tell
yeah,
you,
okay, right.
yes, yes. Your device, if you make a beautiful intention, today I sent an intention to a friend. She wants to use this. She's a physician, actually, and she has a friend who's dealing with alcoholism. And she said, Nisha, I read your book. This makes sense to me. I didn't go into the details about the friend, but she wants to use the device, imprint it, and give it to the friend to help the friend with alcoholism. Now, we don't know, she doesn't know how to imprint. And I said, here's the thing to do. Make the intention like a prayer. So you say, I humbly ask the friend be relieved from suffering in all space, all time, all dimensions.
Mm-hmm.
Thy will be done. Okay, I wrote a few more sentences for her to get her started, because once you link with the divine, you have to link with that. You are yourself a divine being. You're bringing the deepest wishes of service. So it's an inside out process, and you offer that. That is tremendous power. This is tremendous power. So don't mistake that this is not, what am I going to do, little old me, my effect is nothing. No, it's not true. The field is immense. Your loving presence, your unique contributions go into that field. Okay,
Mm,
make no mistake about it. So Dr. Hawkins has, my teacher, Dr. David Hawkins, used to say that, when that group, holy group, has a satsang or a holy gathering, that has an effect on souls that are really struggling. And actually, one lecture he even said a child in Darfur, who at that time, Darfur in southern Sudan, I believe, was struggling with malnutrition, a lot of civil war, but that, your prayerful right here in Sedona, Arizona is having an effect on that part of the world because
mm-hmm,
of the field effect. We are not separate. Matja, you might be in Europe and I'm here in California, but we are connected to the field effects.
mm-hmm.
And that's what I call the granny effect in my book, because the grandmother in her church group are praying for you. How does that prayer reach you? How does it know to reach Matja in Europe, or Nisha in California? The
It has
recipient is
information.
benefited,
It has
huh?
information that you're intending, and that's already an information where, and because the consciousness is smart, so it knows if you're intending for a specific person. I think it knows, but um, here the fascinating thing is that he has proven that sustained intention on this advice that we're talking about.
Yeah,
So he would intend, let's say, to change pH -1 or +1, let's say,
yeah.
and that's statistically unlikely at all. It doesn't happen, right?
No, would not. I told you any deviation away from calculated equilibrium pH is meaningful. It shouldn't happen.
Right.
And has never happened. I mean, this is really true in normal labs and their reference values. These are documented. There are books on this, so he deviated totally and in a big way.
How
This was
long?
not random.
How long does it take for the intention device to be imprinted on?
So, and I've been through the imprinting sessions. It takes about 45 minutes. And then they got better and better, but I would say about 45 minutes in average. Why? Because all of us would sit quietly. We go into meditation.
Mm-hmm.
There's 4 or 5 of us, and the device would be on the table in front. We don't touch it. It's just sitting there. And then, we're close our eyes, and then Dr. Tiller would read the intention statement. I did this for my patient. He has arthritis, and it's reported in my book, Mark, his case,
Right. Right.
ankylosing spondylitis. And that's what we did. We would say, we humbly request, and then Tiller would read the intention statement that my patient created with me. We both said, is this making sense? Is this meaningful to you? Okay. So it wasn't just, I want my pain away. It was very interesting that this gentleman really wanted to learn the lessons from this arthritis. That was one of the objectives, and that he wanted peace around this. Okay, he was losing his income. He had lost his livelihood in a big way. Every day was a struggle. He was lifting his left arm like this. He get withered away. I mean, this is serious. I know these things happen in the best conventional care. And so our intention was read out loud, and then we go into silence. And this is very key what Tiller wrote. He wrote this every time. It could be pH of water, it could be fruit fly, it could be enzymes, it could be a patient, it could be autistic children, it could be to relieve Matya's loneliness, it could be helping Nisha, it could be anything. But he always said it is aligning with God's will.
Right.
God's will is to be shown the truth.
So
End of story.
for a scientist to try this experiment, they need to have an open mind and be like, well, if I'm gonna go into this experiment, I have to be like a method actor and actually believe the prayer and do it. Otherwise, it's not going to work.
They may say that intellectually, but with Tiller, when I first met him, and I have met many wonderful spiritual teachers, Tiller is like an adept. He is not in the intellectual range anymore.
Mm.
To me, when I hear him speak, this is a masterful speak. It is not even an intellectual exercise. So people who try to do this experiment, I would say to you, be very, very aware, because even if you have these little things like testing God, no, it doesn't work like that.
Right.
Tiller is not testing God. He's saying, let's test intention, but we will have God show us the way.
So it's
Thy will be done.
so it's the purity of the motive that counts in intention, right?
Absolutely. Your motivation is everything. And that's why in Bridging Science and Spirit, I give that the scale of consciousness, the levels of consciousness, which was a big, it really jumped me forward in my understanding of how everyone works, how everything works. Each one has its own essence of truth, from Christ consciousness right down to death. You have these spectrum, right? And so Tiller is coming from the level of the heart. He's not a proud man. He's not here to get accolades. He's simply saying, let's test this whole assumption out. Let's do this under controlled conditions. Because if this is the, if humanity is ready to make the next jump, we have to jump away from electromagnetism. We've already done this, but we have to go higher because we are at that point now. We'll just keep iterations of the same old, same
Right,
old.
right, right. So, wow, this is it's quite radical for science to accept that a device. So, does it matter if a device does a device always need to be with the water, or can you, or is it possible to imprint something that is not even there?
I
Like
didn't understand your question.
if you have a device and you imprint the device and you turn on the device and say this device will change the water, and you're in California, but the lab is in Minnesota, let's say, and you're gonna imprint the water that's in Minnesota. Is that possible if you write the exact address or whatever?
Yes, it does happen.
Wow.
Yeah, so he had a device in Payson, Arizona, the Tiller team, and Berlin in Germany. They had experiments with European labs, and Berlin was one of the sites. And yeah, so the device was in Payson, but the experiment was running in Berlin. That's what he calls it. That's the vector field effect.
Wow. So distance
Yes.
does not matter at all.
It doesn't matter. It doesn't decay. It doesn't decay over miles and thousands of miles. So, uh, we had done experiment to help autistic children, and they were as far away as Australia. I think families in New Zealand, Finland. Many of them were around America. And then he did the loneliness project. That was mostly in San Francisco. He's in Payson, Arizona, and the people are in San Francisco. Now, Tiller's not met these people,
Right.
They don't know who he is. I mean, he's sitting in Arizona. He's now 91, and he wrote an intention statement for loneliness, which is really a huge problem in our world today. We're very disconnected. And he simply said that loneliness, the underlying thing, and this is genius, I think, also, is self-acceptance, self-love.
Yeah. Yeah. Everybody
To
needs more of that.
increase that self-love. Yeah, it is a very beautiful way. You don't have to do all these regressions and all the stories. You simply say, love yourself. And in that, you can heal a lot. So anyway, he wrote a statement for self-love, and I can tell you that increased the coherence in the recipients sitting in San Francisco to such a high degree that it wasn't just their self-acceptance, which was really measured by a standard um, scale. Okay, it's the Neff scale, Kristen Neff scale. It's again in the book. I put the graph there. It's all there. But what was happening was even more interesting. I call it the spillover effect. People started to give testimonials to Dr. Hilberg, and she's the psychologist who teamed up with Tiller. And she says, people are saying, I'm making better food choices. People are losing weight. They became more peaceful, even though everything in their outer conditions was the same. They were not taking more chemicals. They lost weight. They gave up smoking. Somebody even said, I'm picking up my socks off the floor. I put my socks away. Okay. So they became neater in their life. It
Right.
was,
So a lot of things changed without them doing anything by just agreeing to be part of the
it
experiment.
wasn't willpower.
Right, right. It just suddenly they woke up and they're like, I'm just not gonna
I
make that
wouldn't say it was
decision.
sudden, but there was these changes
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
unfolding in their life, and they began to notice. Even their loved ones said, hey, you're doing the dishes and I don't have to ask you to do that. You're picking up your socks and I don't have to ask you a 10th time to do
Right.
it. It was
W-
it was amazing, like something in their subconscious and conscious shifted. But I think it was loving. They felt peaceful, that they were a kind of a quiet joy
Right,
crept
right.
into the lives. Yeah.
Would you say that that is would be similar to having a group of people praying for you?
So, in the afterword, I wrote St. Matthew, where two or more are gathered in my name, there I am amongst them.
Yeah.
Yes, I think Tiller joined with the divine, and he has never let go. That was his whole principle. To him, science and spirit are equal, logos and mythos equal. They can't be separated. You can't do that. It used to be true, 400 years ago when Descartes says, you put mind here and you put materials here, they're separate. That served us, but now we made a huge circle. We're coming back to, we have to bring the spiritual side into our lives, our daily lives, and make it
Right.
live, enliven it, not just, it's not lip service anymore. This is living it.
Um, I'm very interested in the spoon. So there's a thing in the book, and it kind of reminded me of I used to be my favorite movie at one time, The Matrix. When I saw it, I dragged my parents to see it. I saw it three
Yeah.
times in a couple days. Anyway, it was so the spoon basically. You said you witnessed somebody. Imagine this is a spoon, and somebody was like manipulating the top of the spoon easily because he loosened the metal with his intention, basically. Okay, are you gonna do
I just happened to have lunch here.
that?
So it was Dr. Doug Matsky. He's a quantum computer expert. So he does mathematics for computer, the new quantum computing. He's an expert in that. So he would often come down and join Dr. Tiller and me on Thursdays. And so one of those meetings, we had lunch, and he was simply, and I can't do it. I've done it once. Okay. And he says, you just stroke it, you're stroking it, and then it'll just bend. It's like giving permission. And I took the spoon from it. It was like butter. I mean, and it was just bent configuration. And it wasn't even hot. It was just butter, soft as butter. You could twist it and tie a knot even with the stem.
Hmm.
So, so how does the spoon bending, how does that fit? Because it was happening. I mean, that's what I brought the spoon bending into the discussion, because it is a subtle energy effect. It's not a traditional force. Electromagnetism you didn't put heat into this, make it red hot and then bend it. No,
Right, right, right.
it's not a nuclear force, not the short range or strong or weak nuclear forces, and it's not gravity. He didn't drop the spoon. I dropped it. Sorry.
It's all right.
Okay, didn't drop this. I'm glad you asked about the spoon. I just happened to have one. So I bring the perspective of the traditional forces of four of them: electromagnetism, strong nuclear force, weak nuclear force, and gravity. All those four cannot do what the spoon did, what Doug did with the spoon. So it is his intention and his subtle energies, and he can absolutely do. And he's done so many. We go to restaurants and his wife says, don't you dare touch the fork,
But
So that was the whole idea, is to bring the spoon bending to illustrate the distinction between traditional forces and subtle energies,
Like,
which is
hold
a
on,
different.
I'm trying to kind of figure out, is it because, is he a meditator and that's why his intention is more powerful? Because other people that probably try to do this have doubt, and they look at this and they're like, there's
No, I don't
5%
think,
doubt.
actually, when I did a Facebook post on this a few months ago, several people sent pictures, and many of them said, I tried this, and they were bending spoons. I don't
What?
think yeah, they were bending
Oh
spoons.
my
They're,
gosh.
and so I think, Matcha, you can do it too. You
You
can
know
try it
what?
tonight.
It reminds
Mhm.
me, one time I was at a we had a bowl of fruit one
By the way,
time.
you're not more powerful or less powerful if you can do it or don't. It doesn't matter. It's just
Right, right,
showing
right.
you're getting familiar with your subtle energies, okay? And you can do that with Tai Chi, you can do that with Qigong, you can do that with yoga, you can do that with meditation. You'll get better at this, that's all. But it
But
doesn't mean too much. I was just making a distinction.
right, right, right. So one time I was there was a fruit bowl, and for some reason I was just playing around with my intention to move a little bit,
Yeah.
one of the apples, the small apples, and I thought for a moment, like, I kind of looked away, and I thought the apple moved a little bit, and I don't know why, it just freaked me out. I was like, whoa, this, I kind of, like, my mind discounted it as like, this is not possible. I still to this day don't know if it's because maybe it went down, or because it's such a coincidence that I was intending it and then it happened. Um, but anyway, it might have been synchronicity. But I'm very interested.
That's your rational mind there, but
Yeah,
that's okay. Sometimes it's healthy to have this, to really ask
I
and to
I believe it
develop
though.
the inner faith that, yeah, I'm capable of these things, and
I
they'll become routine. I'll give you an example. One
Okay.
of my patients a few months ago said, I need to talk to you urgently, and she has rheumatoid arthritis. She's a physician herself. She's a gynecologist, obstetrician gynecologist in the upper Midwest, and we used to have many conversations around meditation. She was very inclined with my way of thinking. So we did all of the things conventionally. She has rheumatoid arthritis, so we would do those things, but she really wanted to look at these other aspects, which is nutrition. We did those. Supplements, we did those. And I said, you can do things like Tai Chi. She says, okay. But she was very much interested in the spiritual um, methods, you might say methods, okay, meditation. So she actually made a temple in her room. She's not her room, sorry, in her home. She even furnished with idols and lovely carpet. So to her, this was very serious. I'm
Hmm.
creating a space very sacred. And she went deep into meditation. I mean, 1-2 hours a day. This is
Wow.
a physician. And then what happened was these gifts means she became clairvoyant. She could read people's minds. She could predict the future by at least 4 or 5 days. She knew what was going to happen, and it would happen. Or
W-
she knew she could read
Wow.
people's minds as though we were talking to each other,
Like what?
and
What?
she couldn't shut out the people's thoughts. She could read them, like, oh, I can hear them. I can read everything that's really on their minds,
Wow.
okay, without any, like, the veil was lifted. She was overwhelmed. And so these are siddhis, these are psychoenergetic gifts. They're gifts, and they became so loud and so much for her. She was overwhelmed. And I said, yeah, this is actually expected in some people. When you go into meditation, you can have gifts, remote viewing could happen, you can see symbols. And she says one other thing, she could read her textbook of medicine. She said it's like kindergarten. I know this already. She would close it. She says, I already know this. She didn't have to study anymore, and she passed those board exams. She says it was like kindergarten. I knew all this. What is this? This is not the word rubbish, but she says, like, we're crawling around on the floor. It
Right.
was her perceptions changed.
Is that
But
because
what
she reached a higher level of consciousness and she was able
yes,
easily to understand
she
the lower one?
right,
Right.
it's like you climb a great height, and you can look at all of these, and they're known to you.
Right.
They're known to you. You didn't have to learn that again. She lost the fear of exams, by the way. The exam was okay. She actually then retired. She's no longer doing, she just wants to do spiritual work. It's amazing. She says her life is so joyful, whether it's arthritis or not, it doesn't matter. She just feels so nourished and enriched by her spiritual work, just for the joy of it. Not just, she didn't want the gifts of God, it was for the love of God. There's a big distinction here. It's the
Intention,
same with Tiller.
purity,
I
purity of
love God,
intention.
not for the gifts of God, but for the sheer being aligned with that will is everything to me, everything to me. So with her, with my patient, I said, look, yeah, this has happened to you. Don't be frightened by it, but you can actually pray that it be taken away, that it be put away, that you don't need this. And that's what she did. She, in meditation, said, please, may I have this? Just, I don't need it. And it went away. She's
Yeah.
back to her, she says it's distracting to be able to read everyone's thoughts, a friend, a phone, anybody. She knew. They could be lying, but she knew. She
Yeah.
says it's like everything was so in plain view. So it's interesting. These things happen, and they're not mysterious, okay?
Yeah.
Mystics
She,
know what to do, and they keep going. You can use it, or you just keep going on a momentum.
yeah, because those I think gifts that one gets along the way are can be a distraction. There's a because there's an old not Ramana Maharshi, Ramakrishna story of this guy that tried to develop a city of city, meaning the gift of going across the river, without the boat. And he spent 10 years doing that. He goes to his master and he's like, Master, I've learned how to go across the
Yes.
river without the boat. And the master's like, well, you pay only 20 cents to go across the boat, and you spend 10 years doing that.
Yeah. Yeah. Let's get practical, right?
I want to
Yeah.
also tie in, a lot of people are into law of attraction nowadays. And I found it interesting that Tiller, when imprinting, it's very important to tie an emotion into this. He's like, you can't just be emptying, kind of empty intending. You have to have an emotion behind it.
Mhm.
So talk a little bit about that, the importance of emotion.
Yeah, the emotion, so when they go into this imprinting session and, they read, Tiller reads the intention, thy will be done, and we go into meditation. So say for the pH of water, Jean would say, I used to visualize the pH just going up and up and up. And she would say, I would bring such joy into it as each
Mm,
0.1 unit point, so she's saying this, and almost rising from her chair. So there was this enormous sense of possibility, that openness and receptivity, and that was joyful. That was where the emotion comes in. It wasn't, and you know what, I think they would have been joyful if nothing happened. They were just that kind of inner way. It's like saying, tennis brings me joy. No, I
mm,
think it's your joy of life that you play tennis. It's your joy
right,
of life that
right,
expresses itself in this experiment, that expresses itself in the love of chocolate chip cookies or baking or writing the intention for this friend of mine today and saying, let's help your alcoholic friend. Let's just write it. We don't need a device, but the writing process and holding that intention in a prayerful way, and then surrender and let it go. Let divine do its work, but you have done yours because you have
right.
given something of your heart. But it's right. It's nice to write it out. There's some power and something very cohering to bring that thought and now writing it out in black and white. Okay,
Right.
that's a creative process. So that emotion is where Tiller says is the source of deltrons. Deltrons connect the slower than the speed of light world, which is us here, electromagnetism. Einstein said does not go faster than the speed of light, right? That's our world, that's our science. But deltrons are much faster. It's a product of consciousness. that is superluminal, calls it faster than the speed of light. That's the connector. So
Right.
emotions, when you pump emotions, you connect these two realms. And I wrote that essay in my book, um, where the deltrons are flowing as Tiller's imprinting, and they, it's a perspective of the deltron, and they go whoosh, they bypass the photons and go into the R space realm, into super consciousness.
Because
You might want to
otherwise,
revisit that essay. It came to me on a bus in Singapore. I realized, I realized, wait a second, just
I'm
right from the perspective of a deltron, because these things will be discovered in future.
so when you change the pH of water, how much energy would ordinarily be required to change it by 1 point, let's say? Because pH of water normally is about 5.5, is it? Around there?
Well, 5.8 in normal
Right.
room conditions, yeah. So if you electrocute the water, it needs about, now, energy is usually talked about in joules,
Mm-hmm.
but Tiller made a calculation that it's 26 milli equivalent volts. And you think it's tiny, but that you can zap water and it will change the pH. So he gave a standard that each pH rise, you have this much free energy. Okay, where's that energy coming from? And that's where the beauty was. It's coming from the coherence in the physical vacuum. It's a non-dispersive medium. Non-dispersive, it's not the air. The physical vacuum is where stuff comes from. It's the potential ground
Right, right,
zero
right, right.
of
No, no.
stuff. Yeah.
But my question is, how much energy would you if you didn't do that, if you didn't do the intention device, and you just did somehow try to change the pH of water?
Oh, you could get this in any thermodynamic textbook. You can go
Okay,
there, and their values of these things. Yeah, I don't know it off the hand, but I
okay,
know what Tiller's work. Each pH is this much free energy, and that is the source is not the source is actually coherence, informational coherence of the physical vacuum, and the physical vacuum is enormous energy.
right. Because it was something about the temperature. It was like one
Oh yeah, one pH would be 300 degrees of the room burning up.
yeah.
If
So
it was thermal, energy, but the
okay,
room didn't burn up. The room is not burning up. The pressure in the room doesn't change. The volume doesn't change. That's why he said it has to be in the entropy has to change. And the entropy changes because you've created new information. And
hmm.
when you have coherence, you have that's neg entropy. Yeah, we're using terms that may be confusing to your listeners, but essentially, information is a source of free energy.
Wow.
Okay, and that
So
information tips the balance in the physical vacuum. It's the space itself changing. That's why he called it reciprocal space. That's the blueprint, and everything in the D space world is changed.
okay, can I ask you like a bit more of a different question? It's like okay, let's say I have a space in the house where I study, and would it be helpful if I meditate in that space as well, but meditate with the intention that this is the space that's going to be conducive for me to learn well?
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely. Absolutely. In fact, I would encourage you to do that.
Wow, I never thought of that.
Matthias, I will send you a meditation
Okay.
that I wrote for people who are subscribers to my list. NishaManekMD.com is my website. And there they can get the Buddha relic paper, the original paper describing the relics of the Buddha. And the experiment, we went on to do that. But, in that email subscription, I'd sent it out. I think it was in April or May. How to meditate to consecrate your space to make it like Westminster Abbey.
Right.
That was the example I gave, because you, me, everybody deserves to live in a sacred space. Everyone. That's our inheritance. We can create these spaces that are healing, that are elevating, that change our very brain and our physiology. Like that lady, the obstetrician, she looks at this thing and she says, I know this.
Mm.
But she created the space in her own home through her meditations.
So maybe in the future there'll be a person responsible in a hospital that will
Yeah.
raise the energy of every because you said what I found interesting, you said that if you have a healing practice and people come in for a healing session, the potential energy of the room is going down. Like,
It's like
first of
they're
all,
soaking it up. They're soaking up
right,
the,
how do you,
yeah.
is that the electromagnetic measurement, and then out of the the equations they get the potential energy?
So when Tiller did this in a complementary integrative medicine clinic, I wrote about it in the book. They were just measuring the pH, and the pH would dip, dip,
Hmm.
dip, and go up again. So then from those pH, he can calculate the free energy of the room. And he could
Wow.
say, wow, you know, every time a client comes in and they're worked on in that room, something, the pH is fluctuating in a very precise way. They could see that and make calculations. So with your intention, yes, you can pump up your space. I think in future we will have better detectors than pH meters. pH's
Right.
meter is what Tiller did. But this is what, if you have listeners who know physics and thermodynamics, I think we need to go there. People who can take Tiller's work and go in the future, but they have to be very alert and conscious. It's a prerequisite, I'm telling you.
Mm.
You have to be alert, not just saying, oh, we're going to make lots of money and we're going to going
Right,
to do
right,
all
right,
this
right.
stuff. You know,
No,
I give
no,
an example
here,
of the garage experiment. Okay, so you can create these things and conditions, do it in a way that really is for the betterment of human, to speed them along their evolutionary pathway.
oh, talking about speeding people up, do you think how much is it the volition, the agreement? Because in the experiment with Tiller, the autistic kids and the lonely people, they all agreed to that. But I'm thinking if people didn't agree to this, the results wouldn't be as great because they are receptive. Maybe if people aren't receptive, like I'm sure there's millions of people in the world that their grandma prays for them, but they it's changing a potential, but they're not maybe receptive. So how much, I don't know, maybe you probably didn't.
But you still keep giving. You can,
Right, right, right,
so I think you're not vested in the outcome.
right.
You're
Okay.
not attached to it, but you still do your work, because by doing that you're growing and you're contributing to the field. That's very meaningful. You're not
Hmm.
attached to the outcome all the time. You're simply saying, I give this of my own heart. Tiller does all of these things for free, you know.
Right,
He's
right,
not
right.
interested in,
He's not
I do.
interested in accolades, and he's not getting any.
No, it
Yeah,
was
yeah.
really remarkable. You know, he's a very simple man. He says, I can do these things. If I can change water and enzymes and fruit flies, and you know, we can do these things. Let's do it. Let's help the autistic children. Actually, the proposal was brought to him, and it was very natural for him to say yes. And also for the loneliness experiment, very natural. And when my patient called me, I said, wait a second, you know, this is not FDA approved. We have never done this. I approached it to Tiller and I said, what do you think? He says, I think we should do it, but let him know that this has never been tested, but I'm willing to work with you. I'm
It
willing to, yeah.
it has no
You see, it
downside.
was a willingness. It wasn't, let me see your insurance card and let me see. I mean, it was just,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you see, he came from a perspective of, can we serve this man? But just tell him that there are no promises. All I can say is that I am capable of creating a device just for him. What are the outcomes? You're the doctor. What do you want us to do? That's where I work with my patients. So
I
it
want.
was really a one of service, not just,
Right, right, right.
yeah.
I want to mention to people that when I was writing a psychology paper, I contacted Nisha because there was a study came out that said basically it was if you sit down with a patient and they have psychiatric problems or whatever, and You don't do any techniques. You just try to build a good relationship. They found a good result, and you could call it placebo or whatever. But I think the intention, the intention is what was important, right? If you have
Yes.
care and you just talk to them and just talk to them like they're your brother or sister, like you care for them, that alone is therapy already, right?
That's an information exchange. That information exchange reduces entropy, creates free energy, which does useful work in their own structures, into their own informational highways, into their own bodies. So what you're doing there has actual physical consequences.
Hmm.
Okay, it's not just a belief thing. It really has physical consequences. And one day we will be measuring this, with blood testing and all this. But right now I know that when we do standardized outcomes in patients or anxiety, depression scores and autistic children, the ATEC scores, they improve. And Tiller had no interaction with them. And here at the bedside with you as a psychologist, and you're saying, and that's one thing I miss in telemedicine, because in the pandemic, my office is closed. Okay, I do medical consultations in the video like this, and I have to tell my patients sometimes, are you ready to look at a more integrative way? Let's look at these, and many of them have read the book, so it's easier. We can really go speed along. If they're not ready, we don't go there, but I do ask them permission that can we set an intention,
Hmm.
and then I email them what this would look like. But we work on it together towards the end of the visit. And I'll tell you, 100% of the time, nobody said no, actually. Most of them are very curious about this, and they realize that they are in power. They're in charge. They are able to not be shy about it, but say, I want this. I want this. I would like this. Let's put it down. Let's put it down. Let's write it down.
So
Let's then
they sorry, they write the intention, and then you are you
we both
helping them?
write it together.
Okay, okay.
We create that information together.
Wow.
And so that exchange itself, I get even deeper into what's really going on into their mind, into their consciousness. Because you see, a doctor, it's what we normally do is, what's your level of pain, what's your side effects, here's
Yeah.
your lab test, bye bye. But now we say, what really is going on? What has this visit, what is the one thing you want in this visit? Why is it like that? Did you think about it? And many of them now are, once they know me and how I do things, that
Yeah.
they'll go there. Yeah.
I just want to talk about the future a little bit, because I had when I was doing that psychology paper, I also discovered your paper you did, I think in 2011, where you said the placebo effect for medicine is becoming is going up and up. At least in the States, it's on the increase, and they don't know why. And Tiller and you um, wrote the
Yes.
paper.
Untangling the entanglement. That's right.
Right.
That it was a physics perspective on the placebo effect,
Hmm.
untangling the entanglement. And essentially, you see, what we think normally in science, and certainly in medicine, is that there's a doctor, a patient, a treatment, and a placebo. All these elements are separated, right? Physical separation, and that the treatment and placebo are separated. But what we're saying in that paper is that that's not true. There's entanglement between all levels, and you can calculate it. I gave big calculations in that paper, and that the entanglement effects take over. When you enter into a system, when you sign the consent form, I am part of this experiment, you're entangled. You and your doctor, you and the treatment, you and the placebo, all of it is entangled. And once that happens, the treatment, and I'm going to put this, okay, the treatment and this placebo, they behave like one another. The placebo is not placebo anymore. It's behaving like an activated treatment, because it's entangled. And this is what we're saying. It's not just you're believing that this dummy pill is going to work. Yeah, your beliefs are powerful, but that the entanglement effects are at play also. Those field effects are playing out also. And you can calculate that. And so, you know what's happening in the USA is that placebo effects, first of all, are huge. In trials, you have to do thousands upon thousands of participants to be able to tease out
Right.
the effects of an active treatment versus a dummy treatment. I mean, the numbers are huge. So the costs have gone up to do successful trials. But what we're saying in our paper is that, okay, the placebo is up, the effect is up because the entanglement effects, the dummy is not behaving like a dummy anymore. It's actually an active treatment. And in fact, in America, in certain clinics for migraines, asthma, irritable bowel, the patient is given a dummy pill intentionally. We actually say, excuse me, this is a dummy pill, but it will help you because the science shows it helps you. And I think it's, yes, the person's belief, but I think it's more that you're now entangled with that. Your wishes, the entanglement effects of active treatments, all are playing out and making it successful. The outcomes then are beneficial.
Right. So
That's
it's
what I'm
not
saying. I'm saying a lot of words, but
right,
is
right.
it?
So is it the protocol itself that everybody's consenting and all that that was different than before? Because that would be maybe before when they did placebo, it was a different mechanism. Or is it that there's another factor that the physical that the nature of physical universe is changing and that it's more susceptible to intention? Is
I
that
think the
another
nature, I
theory?
think it's a second one. I think
Right.
you hit it, that we are waking up as a species, and nature, it's not even 10 years ago, 20 years, we're speeding along, that the nature itself is more connected,
Hmm.
that there's more connectivity, more deltrons, more entanglement effects. And so we're going to see these effects more and more. Just we are creating it, we're creating our reality.
Wow. So maybe in the future we won't even need medicine. It would be like, well, this we'll just intend the pill to be helpful. Be like, this is the
But
pill.
that's homeopathy, right? When you make a
Oh, right.
remedy, when you succuss and splash a remedy, when they were making remedies, all those, the original homeopathic remedies was an intention, and you dilute and dilute. There's no chemical component in it, and
Oh,
that's the protest that medical science has, that there's no chemical in it. How can it have an effect? But their mindset is of a chemical thing doing
right,
something. And
right.
Tiller is saying, no, your intention and field effects have changed that water. That remedy is very active. My intention
Wow.
with this device is very active, right? So homeopathy, yes, it's very potent. You know, don't mess with it. I've taken homeopathy and it definitely has an effect. So, you know, you don't need a chemical potential in it.
Yeah,
You don't need a molecule of the original stuff in it
right. So
anymore.
it's
But
the
it's,
intention. I didn't realize that homeopathy is basically imprinted intention on these
yes, it's
capsules or whatever.
diluted and diluted and diluted, and there's no but it's intention. You know, they used to make those remedies by hand. That's intention.
Ah,
Ah, exactly. You can
I don't
create these
know.
remedies. You're just like you're creating your space for studying. You're creating, why not create a remedy?
Right.
Actually, it's a very good practice. You know, I can take this water and bless it and say that, you know, it'll have beneficial effects, that this water is refreshing for my cells. Whatever, you can intend these things. You're
You know,
creating,
that's one good advertising strategy. You know, become a believer and your grades will go up. You
well,
know, you hook them by the grade, but then they become a better human being. So it's a win-win-win for everybody, you
I like your plan, Matthias. It's
know?
good. It's
All
good.
right.
You do that.
Okay, I think we're gonna end on that note. Thank you very much, Nisha Manek, everybody. And thank you for listening and watching the show. Thank you.